While Blue Origin just completed its 11th manned trip, SpaceX has been busy launching satellites and rescuing stranded astronauts from the International Space Station. Those astronauts were not able to return home on their original Boeing craft. Amazon now preparing for the inaugural launch of its own satellite project. So amid all the competition, where can investors find the most opportunity in the space race? Here with more, Andrew Channon, the co-founder and CEO of Procure AM. It is an ETF company focused on the space sector. Andrew, great to have you back with us this morning. Obviously, Blue Origin getting a lot of attention this morning, but where do you think retail investors should be looking for the most opportunity in space right now?
So it's been a really interesting, a lot of developments for this industry, really going back to May last year, where we started seeing a lot of communications names getting buzz. And if you look back at the size and the growth of the overall space industry over the last many decades, communications has really been the largest portion of the revenue generator for the space industry. And so while many people don't predict that to change, there are many things that are occurring, especially with launch, that are allowing a lot of entrants into this industry and allowing a lot of different companies to access space at much lower costs. So we brought out UFO actually 6 years ago. We celebrated our 6-year anniversary last Friday. And we've seen tremendous changes for the space industry over that time. And it's a way for investors to get exposure to roughly 35 publicly traded companies from around the world, specializing in all different areas of the space industry.
Yeah, and I know you have that ability for investors to get into these ETFs that allow them exposure to several dozen of these space names. But if you take a look at the Yahoo Finance platform, we have a new tool that allows you to track private markets, and you can see SpaceX, the #1 name on that list due to its estimated valuation at around $382 billion. Andrew, should investors who are interested in space just go in on a name like SpaceX, or should they be diversified even within the relatively niche sector?
So SpaceX is a really kind of different story, especially, obviously they're a private company. And although there's becoming more ways to gain access for private companies, it's something that we track, even though the fund doesn't currently own any exposure to SpaceX. But those that are getting access, either direct ownership in it or via SPVs, in many cases, it can be very expensive. So it's not just paying for access to it, but in many cases there's entry fees, there's management fees, performance fees, and all different types of fees layered on top, because there is a lot of interest in getting exposure to names like SpaceX. For most investors, though, being able to invest in publicly traded names or ETFs that focus on the space industry may be a way for them to get exposure, and also in some cases benefit from the rising tide that for the space industry has been SpaceX in technologies like reusable rockets, which has significantly reduced the cost of accessing space, which has been a boon for many other companies that are trying to get involved in this new kind of new space race that we're seeing.
And Andrew, my guest host, Tom Hayes, is still here with us over at Great Hill Capital, and Tom has a question for you.
Yeah, Andrew, so reusable rockets is the name of the game. What's your level of confidence? Obviously, Falcon 9 has done thousands of missions up there and brought satellites up with no problem whatsoever. Then you've got Boeing with Vulcan. They've had 2 trips, so that's a positive. And then you've got Blue Origin with New Glenn just doing 1 trip. How do you expect that competition to accelerate over the next couple of years? And kind of what are your heaviest weights in the ETF that are playing the space theme?
Yeah, so launch is extremely important. And yes, it's been great for getting costs down, but you do have more players coming out. You look at what Amazon is doing with Project Kuiper, and they didn't just sign up Blue Origin to be a launch provider to get their satellites up into space. They actually contracted 4 different companies for, I believe, about 80 launches scheduled over the next several years. And so, even being able to send things to space, it's really important to make sure that you have a diversified list of launch providers, just in case there's any mishaps at one company or another. And so that's kind of diversifying across the launch industry, but then you have different types of launch companies. So, for Project Kuiper, they're planning to launch about 3,200 satellites. About 1,600 of them need to be launched in about a year's time. And so you need to have bandwidth in and plenty of supply in launch to be able to get that amount of satellites up. SpaceX has Starlink, which has been a rival, and they have now more satellites in operation than there were total satellites in operation when we first launched our fund 6 years ago. So we've been seeing a tremendous amount of companies sending satellites into low Earth orbit, and it's happening rapidly. So, in our fund, we have companies like for launch, you have Rocket Lab, another name that we hadn't mentioned, doesn't have any of those Project Kuiper launches, but they're working on their next generation rocket as well, so they could send much larger payloads up. We have names like Lockheed and Boeing, which form the United Launch Alliance as well, which is a launch provider.